Hello again, this is WildM, and these are the Quadrant finals for SpaceChem Tournament 2013. Mr. Blarney will be starting us off with tetrazine isomers. From the very start, you can see the main problem with this puzzle. Forked tetrazine requires 6 hydrogens instead of 4. This unbalances the puzzle pretty seriously and, in most cases, requires a lot of buffer pipe. That being said, most of these reactors are pretty simple. We have our nitrogen disassembly reactor, which pretty efficiently debonds with 3 in a row, and our hydrogen disassembly reactor, which does almost the same thing. Over here, we have our cyclotetrazine reactor, which kinda surprises me. Why not run the blue Waldo in a straight line? I think you could just put an input beta at the bottom, and then put an input alpha on the right side of Fred's path. You may need an extra bonder to finish that last connection, but that'd still be a net savings of 1 symbol. Anyway, back to the actual solution. This reactor here prepares 2 of our products. Cyclotetrazine is already completed, and all we need to do is break a single bond and remove a hydrogen, as seen here, to make our chain tetrazine. I'm also not a fan of this reactor. Zooming out a bit, you can see that in a moment, this one is our limiting factor. So if we could just, decrease the cycle count on this specific reactor, we would save a potentially large amount of cycles. If we modified our grab and input portions here, we could change it around so that we output a molecule before starting the input process over. It wouldn't be as, this is a symbol challenge, and it wouldn't be a symbol change, but at the very least, losing by cycle counts on a symbol challenge is a pretty painful way to go. Our final reactor here is our most complicated. Mr. Blarney builds a forked tetrazine from scratch, which, as you can see, is pretty symbol heavy. That's 36 symbols if I'm counting right, and that counts for over 1/3 of our total symbols. With his cyclotetrazine and chain tetrazine division, coupled with the additional hydrogens needed for forked tetrazine, our products are output in a 3:3:4 ratio. Speaking of these products, don't these nitrogen configurations look a bit like Tetris blocks to you? Hopefully it's not just me. And being a symbol challenge, this is very slow, but not too bad. Whew. Boy. Okay, so we're good. Yes, this solution has 1 less reactor. Okay, so let's talk about other differences. Pseudodude disassembles nitrogen using 2 groups of bonders instead of 1 row. This forces him to input his molecule from 1 space further away, and means that essentially nitrogens take 1 cycle longer to output. Fortunately, this doesn't matter one bit. Our limiting factor for this output is going to be this hydrogen pipe, which eventually will have a shortage in atoms, not this always full nitrogen dump pipe. The hydrogen disassembler uses the same idea to output hydrogens on the right side. Unlike Mr. Blarney, Pseudodude assembles cyclotetrazine in its own group. It also uses the same number of symbols as the cyclotetrazine disassembler in my earlier example. Instead of 2 bonds, Pseudodude saves a bond and uses an additional rotate, which you'll see right here. Anyway, you may ask yourself why the hydrogen disassembly reactor has such a long output pipe into the next reactor. Well, looking forward a bit, you can see that there is a timing Waldo in the final reactor. This pipe length ensures that the timing Waldo doesn't go out of sync before and after this nitrogen pipe backs up. And don't really ask me for details, I'm just reading this from Pseudodude's notes. Anyway, I'll speed up a bit. Perfect. Okay, so, right here. This reactor uses a ton of symbols, like Mr. Blarney's reactor, to assemble both the chain tetrazine and forked tetrazine. At this point, the assembly process is basically the same for both reactors, for both outputs, the reason being that this shape is going to be made on both outputs. In addition, this imidazine radical that you just saw created is going to be used both ways, so that's fine. Anyway, yeah, these are pretty complicated, so, I mean, even though this is a lot of symbols, you're gonna have to use a lot of symbols no matter what you do, I think. So, our final reactor just debonds where necessary and outputs the rest. It's not very exciting, but let's just see one just to, you know, get the experience. Which is kind of slow. Anyway, let's go back here. I like this one. So, I have to say, I'm really a fan of this reactor here. It's one of the nicest ones I've seen for these symbols. It's really a testament to what you can do with a single Waldo. Also, this outputs in a more complicated 5:2:2 ratio. So when cyclotetracene completes, we should have enough hydrogens in the pipe to form 16 of the other two. So, yet again, this is a horribly slow solution, but we don't care. So that's 82 symbols for Pseudodude, and I forgot that I had Steam Friend Zone, so I'll turn that off. Anyway, Mr. Blarney has 91. Sorry, Mr. Blarney, but you're off to the loser's bracket. Up next, Echo 2 will be making a glass of water. You'll notice that I've started hiding the cycle count. I'll be hiding them at mostly cycle solutions going forward. Our first reactor separates rubidium hydroxide and cesium hydroxide from water, which you'll see as I'm talking here. Anyway, you can see a bit of a quirk here. This doesn't actually run at input speed. The red Waldo takes 11 cycles per circuit, meaning we'll slowly lag behind as time goes on. And you can already see a little bit of that right here. We'll have a second one coming in yeah. So the basic idea is we just split only when we don't have a hydrogen, which means that we can just fuse back together and output down here. Following our hydroxides, something interesting happens. We perform a similar split as before, but our cesium hydroxide gets fused into a gadolinium ball. This has an atomic number of 64, which means we can form a lot of oxygen very efficiently. For every 3 oxygens we send downward, we send 1 oxygen upward. So, you know, just keep that ratio in mind. Our single oxygen reactor does a similar thing as the last one, breaking down all of our oxygens to hydrogen. For every 3 hydrogens we output at the top, we'll throw away 1 hydrogen at the bottom. Taking into account our previous reactor, that means we now have the perfect hydrogen to oxygen ratio to make water, which is seen here. And it's just very straightforward. All we're doing is inputting, bonding, and outputting. And there's a little bit of reactor priority here, so keep that in mind. This final reactor is going to output our normal non-nuclear water, and also use our, what was that called again? Rubidium hydroxide, right. So it takes our rubidium hydroxide, cuts off the rubidium part, and uses the rest leftover to make water, which, yeah, I guess it's rubidium oxide, I guess, you know, 2 rubidiums, 1 oxygen. In any case, you know, you get the idea. Something also I mentioned here was every one of these notes that was made by Echo 2 is an actual named element in the game, which normally you'll see a lot of this question mark business, so, you know, kind of interesting. Not very common. Right, so let's start over from the beginning. Echo 2's solution is amazingly balanced. Though our first hydrogen output really takes off near the beginning, though our first water output. Anyway, the lower reactors are fast enough that they catch up just exactly. So let's get up to speed here. I don't want to go too fast. Alright, here we go. So, 39. Now watch this. And here's the last output. And this one too. So the top and middle just output at the same time. Completely even. And we have no idea how fast the solution was, so let's move on. I am very excited to say that Krakor's solved this puzzle completely differently, so let's get started. Krakor's first reactor makes a water for every input. It does not give a damn if it receives a hydroxide instead, it just repeatedly splits until the element has broken down to a hydrogen. I added in the various outputs that are generated if you care about that sort of thing. Lots of noble gases in here, and later in the puzzle too, really. So just to show off an example, just split an output at the same time. In this reactor, what we do is form, well, I guess we just fuse everything together. And then we're going to make xenon and krypton, which will then split down to cobalt and argon. So, in this reactor, all we do is just output our cobalts on the top and split our argons on the bottom to make fluorines. And next, we form cobalt-2 fluorides. So this one takes a bit of work to follow, so let's let it start up. Okay, so we get 2 of these at once, and then what we're going to do first is split these fluorines to make beryllium, and then fuse the borons in to make germanium, split the germaniums to make sulfur, and then fuse the boron to make neon waste, and output the rest of the sulfur. So, pretty efficient. Right, so cobalt-2 fluoride is used both as a catalyst and in dental work, just as a side note. This reactor very efficiently turns all of those outputs from the last reactor into a steady stream of hydrogen and sulfur. I'm just going to let this one run for a bit. Always a fan of these chains because it means that you're just going to have some really great fusion and fission going on. Okay, so all this reactor does is take our sulfurs, split them to oxygens, and then use everything to make just a ton of water. So, pretty cool. Anyway, with noble gas math, catalysts, the health benefits of fluorine, and splitting chains of atoms down to helium, this solution may remind you of some of last year's major subjects. Clearly, Cracker was paying attention. So, here in the macro view, you can see that we have a problem. This solution is completely unbalanced, just not balanced at all. In fact, we're going to leave, I think, 16 waste atoms in the top output before we even meet the production quotas in the lower reactor, so, not that great. Our final time is 758 cycles. And how about Echo 2? Well, 723 cycles. Ouch. As I said before, Cracker wasted 16 of his outputs. He would have finished at about 655 cycles had he balanced things perfectly and managed not to lose any speed. In any case, congrats Echo 2. You are moving on to the red finals. Next we have conversion factors, and Cannibal 9 will start us off. If this were a least cycles puzzle, this would probably be a nightmare. However, this is a least symbols puzzle, so it's not so much. Cannibal 9's first reactor takes advantage of Greek fission to break element omega all the way down to carbon and nitrogen, as we see here. There we go. So, already a third of your S-triazine, and that's not too many symbols. Let's watch that one more time. I'm just a huge fan of how the math for that works out. Just, you happen to wind up with both carbon and nitrogen at the same time. Great, so, moving on to the next reactor. It's pretty simple, really. All we're doing is bonding in a loop of 3s, which we've seen a bit of back in, 3, the puzzle. So, yeah, not too bad. Let's, I guess wrap it up. That was pretty quick. Whew. Okay, so, you may think this one is slow, but just wait. So, yeah, not so bad. Right. What if you solved the puzzle differently, though? We'll check that one out. Guava instead decided to make his triazines from hydrogen. This is gonna be a slow one. So Guava creates a few CH radicals and then passes them on to the next reactor. I don't have a lot to say about this reactor aside for potential improvements, and I'll cover those in a bit. If we can, get the finished thing right. Okay, so obviously that pause isn't there normally. I'm a huge fan of what he does with this. just check this out. Okay, so he does his bonding and then fuses those two nitrogens, or those two CHs to nitrogens. Then he's going to do his double rotate, come back down with it. Now, note that as soon as we get another input, what's going to happen is these two are going to get bonded together, meaning that this CH stick is going to get shifted down by 1. Now, watch what happens this time. Instead of this before, we bonded different things and just use that one nitrogen. So we have our S-triazine, and that's it, we're done. I thought it was really smart of Guava to notice that CH has the same proton count as nitrogen. Pretty cool stuff. Also, with all of that cleverness though, came a huge price. This is probably one of the slowest solutions I've seen in a while. So, while we're waiting for that to finish, let's check out this first reactor again. I'm curious if using the bottom hydrogens could have saved symbols in the long run. This blue Waldo uses quite a few flip-flops to waste time. It might have saved those flip-flops if he was generating carbons at a faster rate. Then he could, I don't know, steal the top hydrogen to make a CH radicals? I don't have an example for that right now, but... He also asked me about particle smashing at one point, which I do have an example of, and I really couldn't help him with at the time. I did figure out how to generate hydrogens using particle smashing, but it's actually more efficient to do it with, well, just regular debonding. You know, with one Waldo, you know? Okay, so, looks like we're done finally. We have 23,554 cycles and 42 symbols. So, yeah, congrats on that, wow. Cannonball Canine used 39. Well, it's not all bad, Guava. You can still reach your goal of being insulted by me if you put in the effort. Our last face-off of the winner's bracket will be over barium shortage, and Tough Thought will start us off. Barium shortage has a lot of options and a lot of ways to solve it. Let's look at one of them. This is a bit easier to follow if you start at the endpoints first. We can see that these two reactors help make barium, and these three are going to help make your sulfate anions, which should have 2 double bonds, by the way. Our urea reactor removes the hydrogens and throws away everything else. That's a bit wasteful, but it could be worse. You know, barely. The top reactor splits our iron 3 oxides into iron and oxygen. I should also note that the original puzzle included a mix of iron 3 oxide and iron 2 oxide, which is just FeO. I can't decide if that makes the original harder or easier. Also, there was no reason to leave that start Waldo all the way up there at the top, but it doesn't hurt, I guess. We turn all of our irons and hydrogens into barium in this reactor at a 2:4 ratio. I can't deny that this block is pretty efficient, but you don't need those sync commands. As long as your blue Waldo inputs an alpha before the red Waldo can, you're good. Now, for the sulfate, the first nuclear reactor fuses 2 methylenes into sulfur, outputting the rest separately. Which, I'll try and go a little slower on here. Alright, there we go, sulfur. Okay. The next reactor uses particle smashing to throw away a single methylene, outputting a sulfur and oxygen. It's a shame about all this garbage, but I don't have to tell you how much I appreciate particle smashing. Our final reactor uses 3 oxygens from our iron 3 oxide, seen here, and the sulfur oxide, I guess sulfur oxide? I don't know, anyway. We take all that and we form our sulfate anion. Now, there's a little bit of a problem with this, since, you know, this is, I believe, our limiting factor, so yeah, this one always comes up second. We can't do anything that would slow this one down, so it seems like there's not really a good way to reduce the cycle count in general. But we could save symbols by making the change I'm showing here. Though, really, I mean, who am I, Guava? I don't feel too bad, though, since these are all pretty minor criticisms. By the way, there was one thing that carbon dioxide failed to talk about for this puzzle. Along with its already mentioned use as part of oil well drilling fluid, It is also used in the medical field as a tracing compound for upper and lower gastrointestinal studies. That's why Laylight designed this puzzle using medical waste inputs to fit with the theme. Though, really, if you find rust at a hospital, you should probably be worried. So, if I can make it speed up, there we are. 434 cycles. With the exception of a little waste, all of the problems with it that I had solutions for were symbol related, so, you know, not bad. It could have been much worse.
Which brings us to Serbeldrig's solution. We will start with the iron oxide. He begins by splitting an oxygen to create a beryllium. We'll see it here. Split the oxygen. Then do some fusing to create a barium. The bottom, the omega output, will alternately output beryllium and barium. In the psi zone, he's going to output 2 oxygens. So let's follow the beryllium and barium to this reactor. Red kind of bonds them together, creates this, a beryllium, barium, barium stick. Fuse the berylliums together, and output the 2 bariums. Blue here, so you'll see a pattern of sync, bond, minus output, sync, bond, minus output. You couldn't have done this with flip-flops, dude. I'm sure you could have done this with flip-flops. I mean, sure, this is perfectly well timed for creating barium from excess beryllium, but seriously, you could have saved a lot of symbols with that, I think, by making some flip-flops. But there we go, that's how it makes barium. From the polyethylene, there's this neat little thing with a handoff here, handoff. Fuse the whole polyethylene into a stream of oxygen. Okay? The urea goes down to this reactor, where this looks kind of cool. Fuse that, rebond, fuse, output sulfur. And then this thing is garbage. Big garbage there. But here's your sulfur output. If you could fuse all of this garbage together into another sulfur, but it doesn't really matter because this reactor seems to be a bit of a bottleneck. This reactor takes the sulfur that we just saw and the oxygen from polyethylene, combines that to make sulfate anion. Now, I look at this and I'm like, wow, this looks familiar, doesn't it? Yeah, it's exactly the first challenge in the first SpaceChem tournament where this would have been carbon and this would have been hydrogen, making methane. I remember this whole little one rotate loop thing here, and this little drop grab that saves a cycle, which means this reactor is absolutely as fast as it can be, so even though these two probably could be a little faster, a little better, it doesn't matter because this is the bottleneck. So now we had this reactor outputting 2 oxygens, and this reactor outputting the sulfate. Both of those go to this reactor. The fully formed sulfates, red just feeds them on through. Blue does this really amazing thing to create sulfate ions, anions from these 2 oxygens. Let's see how this works. There's some flip-flop magic going on here. Ooh, almost a collision. Red does a fuse for it. Rotate. That is impressive looking, I have to say. The really cool thing is that if I pause here, so if blue's paused here, red always is here. It's all perfectly timed so that there's no collisions. So Serbeldrig, now that he's going through, 413 cycles. So that means Serbeldrig wins by 21 cycles, even though he's probably going to lose the next round to someone. However, where was it? I have some issues with this. Like, just, you can get rid of that. And in this reactor, you can do some stuff here. Let's just move that up there. Let's change those to flip-flops. Move those over here. Betas there. Move that over here. That'll save you 2 more symbols. And then there was all this nonsense, but I'll leave fixing this to the reader's imaginations. So, congratulations, Serbeldrig, even though this is probably the end of the line for you.
Welcome to the Losers Bracket, where I treat the puzzle discussion a little faster and looser than the Winners Bracket, mainly because, you know, they lost already. I'm sure they don't mind if I take it a little easy. Okay, so, just putting that out there that obviously you could connect this hydrogen just to the pipe and you would be done. However, this puzzle is about accelerating particles, so this would be Nethers' solution. all we're going to see him do is take Carb Omega J, use it to get our inputs, and pass them over. The next reactor, which we can start over again, the next reactor would take Carb Omega P and pass one forward, and for everything else, exact same thing, just grab and rotate. And naturally this one, all it has to do is just the exact same thing. Now, I'll go ahead and say that the fastest time for this is going to be 215 cycles. So really, this puzzle is about how few symbols you can do that fastest time in. And in Nethrus's case, we have 53. So, yeah, pretty straightforward. Let's see. That will put him at first place for, so far. So let's see who's next. Next is Carlbunk with 46 symbols, so we already know the placement, but just let's check it out. Okay, so this one actually, I think, does this in a straight line this time. Still very fast. I believe this is a slightly wider loop than the last time. This one's going to, let's start over again. Gets a double input, which I don't get why I just didn't put an input alpha there instead of the arrow, but, whatever. Actually, I see why now, because, let's check that out again. The problem, the reason it has to go away so fast, otherwise, actually, yeah, he doesn't need arrow, he can just do 2 input alphas. Anyway, same deal, just get them all lined up. This is very compact, this is also very compact, so yeah, cool stuff. Right. Next, we're going to randomly look at Gigi-Gall. Oh, also, Carbog naturally, first place. Nethrus is down at second. So, you can already see Gigi-Gall has 53 symbols, so same thing really, and we already know that it's going to have the same cycle count. So let's just look at these real quick. Basic loop and basic startup with flip-flop there, and same basic loop, and then this one, same deal, just a bunch of loops. Alright, cool. So, since this is a tie based on symbol count and cycle count, we'll have to move to the timestamp tiebreaker, meaning that Nethrus submitted his on the 31st of August at 2:56 p.m., Gigi-Gall on the 31st of August at 10:46 p.m., putting him at third place. Alright, next is Laylight, randomly. This one is 52 symbols, so it's going to be a little higher, but anyway. Something a little unique about this one is that it actually passes the first hydrogen on its own. And that's going to actually go into this reactor, which is the third one, and start a little bit earlier than the other hydrogens. It does this just so that it doesn't have to make a tight loop for the red Waldos on each one. This is a 10 cycle loop, so that's going to be the same thing across the board. So yeah, a lot more extra space to move, and that saves a symbol apparently. So, nice job. That puts Laylight in second place, and Nethrus and Gigi-Gall move down to third and fourth. Oh, right, and next is Darius Raider. Well, same symbol count as Nethrus and Gigi-Gall, so I mean, pretty obvious this is going to be almost the exact same thing. We're passing forward our Carb Omega stick to our third reactor. Same deal, so, Oh, one thing I do like though is just watching this in motion from the macro view. Just watching all these rotate and do a bunch of stuff just to save a few cycles. Really satisfying. Okay, so Darius Raider submitted his on the 24th of August at 9:33 p.m., putting him in third place and pushing Gigi-Gall to fifth. So, sorry Gigi-Gall, I guess you're out, man, but it was fun. Well, I guess Alpha Raptor just threw in the towel. So, this one is very, very low reactor, so that's good. He's managed to find a way to solve the puzzle without using any reactors whatsoever. I don't have a lot else to say about this, I mean, I like the lettering, that's nice. Yeah, I mean, he could have probably found something to do with this pipe. I'm a little disappointed in that. Oh well. Naturally, this puts Alpha Raptor in 6th place, meaning he is not in the top 4. Thanks for playing. Ooh, J-Board, J-Board, J-Board. What did you do? Huh. Alright, so this one's kind of hard to follow. What happened? I see some D-bonds there for some reason, though he passed both forward. Interesting. And he cut that one off. Why would you... Huh. Okay, so, I mean, it works, and obviously these all got passed forward. How did he do that? Let me look at that again. What the heck, man? Let's see. Alright, so he makes longer sticks, I guess, to change how the rotate's gonna work. Though he did fit that into a, 2 spaces, so interesting. This one, same deal, he, for some reason, moves where the carbon is placed, which looks cool, but I don't see why. Still though, I guess he was trying to just pray that he saved one cycle more than everyone else by doing this. But, you know, it's what happens. Also, again, very nice to just watch in action. That puts J-Boar in 6th place, knocking Alpha Raptor to 7th, but still doesn't matter. We still have Carbunk, Leylite, Darius Raider, and Netherus in the top 4. Next is the Knife. Let's see what he does. Well, that's awkward. I guess the Knife didn't actually submit a solution. Well, in that case, let's help him out there. So, the Knife, this is how you do it. And it's as easy as that. Well then, thank you to GG Gall, J-Boar, Alpha Raptor, and the Knife again for participating, but you guys have been unfortunately eliminated. So, we have Carbunk, Leylite, Darius Raider, and Netherus moving on to the next tier of the losers bracket, along with, who are the losers? Krakor, Mr. Blarney, Guave Moment, and Tough Thought. So I'll see you guys in the losers bracket next round, and I'll see Echo 2, Sudadude, Cannibal 9, and Serval Drag in the winners bracket. It's going to be fun.